On this week's episode of Back of the Grid podcast, we're going to be reviewing the Mexican Grand Prix. We're going to be having a little young driver check-in, and we'll be putting together some storylines and some preview for next week's Brazilian Grand Prix. Let's go. Hello and welcome to another edition of Back of the Grid. I'm your host Stu, and I'm joined as always by Tom.
Hello.
And by Chris.
Hello.
Hello. And if you're new to the channel, or if you enjoy listening to us and you haven't done it yet, please hit that subscribe button, whichever format you're watching or listening on. It helps us millions. Right, let's get into this week's episode, guys. Here to review the Mexican Grand Prix. Sadly, no culturally appropriate theme tune for us this week. It's just the regular old.
I'd forgot about that.
Regular old Back of the Grid theme tune.
We played out to that theme tune one year, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean that one time it came out, it was actually, and I don't think Formula One ever actually commissioned it. I mean, it's like someone just went and made it, and then they got it.
I think it was
right?
originally the Mexican Grand Prix promoters used it on their own promotional video,
and it was so good that it was like, okay, we're going to use it. But then, like, now they're keeping on using it. It's become a bit old hat. Is it a bit racist? Is it a bit awkward?
Typical FOM, though, isn't it? Just bleed it until they've got as much out of it as they possibly can.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, it's a classic. It's a classic FOM move. Yeah, let's talk about the race. Let's talk about the whole deal, the whole shebang. Chris, do you want to take us in?
Yeah, not a all-time great race, I don't think.
No. It was engaging.
It was a decent enough race, I think. Like,
I can't work out if the red flag made it better or worse.
I was losing interest by the red flag. I think the red flag definitely saved it. I think we were heading into a heavy lull as that red flag came out. It felt like no. Much like
that just then.
But yeah.
Red flag.
Just to illustrate what a heavy lull feels like. There we have it.
I think it was Karun Chandok at some point over the weekend said something along the lines of, this event has got all the ingredients of a fantastic Grand Prix except a racetrack to deliver it. Like, it's got an amazing crowd, an amazing setting, like amazing, everyone seems to enjoy going there, but the track just never quite seems to deliver, especially the last sector, which is just
final sector's a bit Mickey Mouse.
I think
like
the first sector's decent,
but bending over backwards to try and get that final sector to work, so they can get all the cars through the crowd and like safely, obviously, as well. And it just there's a better way through that. I'm sure there has to be a better way through.
Formula E have a different layout. They kind of loop around the stadium and come back out the same side it goes in, and then use all of the old final corner onto the main straight. Like, that feels like it'd be a better solution.
That feels like a more Formula One solution as well. Because
I think the problem is
big power onto long straight.
The problem is FE cars can basically go side by side anywhere, whereas Formula One cars, I think if they use the FE layout, they'd just single file it through there, and the people who are paying a premium to be in the stadium wouldn't get to see much. I think that those corners are designed to keep the cars in the stadium as long as possible by making them horrible slow corners.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, I mean, things do happen there. Like, we saw Bottas and Stroll have their incident there, which I'm sure
something certainly happened.
So I mean, and it would be exciting to, as a place to watch Formula One. It does look like one of the best places in the world to, to engage with the sport and to engage with our fans and enjoy watching the cars going around on a race weekend. But yeah, in terms of like a track overall, definitely not my favourite either.
No. I suppose we should start by talking about Perez. I mean, we always were going to start by talking about Perez at his home race, I think, come what may. But I
think so.
He was having one of his better weekends. Like, qualifying, he was only a couple of tenths off Verstappen. Yeah. Through practice as well, like he was pretty on it. It was looking all right. he had a monster start. Like, I mean, we've spent all season saying starts are the one weakness that car has, and
Not anymore.
not this weekend.
They've been working on them as well, haven't they? That's the
Yeah.
thing, like,
I mean, but yeah, both of them. Wasn't just a Perez thing. That was it. Verstappen
Yeah,
also
they
got
flew off the
an
line.
absolutely mega launch against the Ferraris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then obviously Perez got himself 3 wide for the lead into turn 1 and didn't get any further.
yeah. Free into turn 1, just don't go.
I mean, it
went
does
down
if you
as a
don't
racing
drive it like it's
incident.
too wide. That was the problem. He got 3 wide and drove it like it
Yeah.
was too wide.
Well, he just chopped across
Yeah.
Leclerc, didn't he? That was
Can-
it. Was
Can I just point out an interesting fact for you? We've now officially talked about Perez for longer than he lasted in the Grand Prix.
you've had your eye on the clock the entire time.
No, when we
dude.
started talking about it, I just pressed play. And I've just been monitoring. He's out now.
Yeah,
And there's
he failed massively, didn't he? Let's be honest.
Yeah, like the 3 wide excuse works midway through a race. You don't necessarily know where everyone is, but going into turn 1, like, if the person you're trying to overtake is in the middle of the track, you have to kind of assume there's going to be someone on their inside as well. You can't just turn across and expect them to turn as well. Like,
Yeah, it was really. Yeah. He was trying to push it. He knew where Verstappen was. He was trying to go around the outside. He was just hoping that he could maybe make Leclerc bottle it and get on the brakes a little bit sooner as he turned in, and or make Leclerc get out of it. But at that point, when you're already at maximum possible braking pressure, if you push brake any harder, you're just locking up and going into someone. So
yeah.
you know, I think it was a really dumb move. I think he's a Formula One driver. He should be better than that. Hamilton did the same thing, and I said the same thing about Hamilton at Qatar.
Yeah. Well, Hamilton said that himself in the cool-down room, didn't he? He said, like, he did a me in Qatar. It was, I mean, Perez's comments during the race in the interviews for him were quite interesting. He basically said there was a chance there for him to take the lead, and if he'd have ended that race, stood second or third on the podium, knowing he had a chance to take the lead and didn't take it, he would have been stood on the podium with regret. And he had a chance and he took that chance. And
That's kind of fair enough, but you can, if just because the chance is there doesn't mean, obviously if the chance is there, take the chance. But then his own actions have made that chance disappear because he didn't take the chance in the right manner.
Yeah.
And
I think that's kind of Perez to a T. Like, he was a phenomenal driver for teams like Force India, Sauber, where you are scrapping for every single point you can get, and sometimes you have to take these massive risks, and sometimes they pay off. When you're in a front-running car, like the pace the Red Bull had, if he'd have backed out of that, come out of turn 1 in 3rd or 4th, he'd probably have built his way back up to 2nd anyway. Yeah. And like, I know it's his home race, he wants to win it, but you have to be more of a big picture driver when you're in a front running team. And he's never seemed to have got out of that scrappy midfield mentality, I don't think, has he?
You only have to look to the conversation we had the other week where I made the comparison to his time at Red Bull feels eerily reminiscent of the brief sprint he had at McLaren, where as soon as he got in a car that was capable of running with the front and having these battles, he just seemed to lose his racecraft. And I mean, in that occasion, he was clattering with his own teammate in Jenson Button, among other people. Because I think it was after Japan we spoke about it, because one of his dive bomb moves in Japan was very reminiscent of the situation he was in at McLaren, where he went up the inside of Button and took him out. So yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know, something about the mentality. It becomes a little bit more desperate because it's like, this car should be winning races, so I have to win races, and like there's just something that switches in his mentality. But it's odd because he's been so reliable for so many years in, like you say, in these midfield teams like the Saubers and the Racing Points through its many guises, and to be the polar opposite when he moved to McLaren, and then again now he's at Red Bull. It just Yeah, it feels like there's something about that pressure that just seems to get to him.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what happened in Turn 1 this week was just it's more desperation. He's had a desperate season. He's made a lot of these mistakes, and it's all out. It's it's much higher pressure. I think especially when you're at Red Bull, and he's just not been able to manage that pressure as well as other drivers. And I think it must be. I feel for him. I really do feel for him because he looked really cut up in the interviews after, and we're witnessing the collapse of someone's career here. Like that's and that I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think the way it looks like things are going at Red Bull for Perez, and we'll talk about Ricciardo in a second. It does look a little bit like Ricciardo's pretty well lined up for that job, for that seat next season, I would say, and Perez knows that, which is why he's putting himself under so much pressure and he's making these mistakes, because it's all compounding and making his life much, much more difficult. So, and you could see it in that interview after the race. You could see you just got that sense that he knows that he's losing his drive here because of these kinds of things. And I don't think he's got an answer. I really don't think he's got an answer.
No. And unfortunately for him, the next biggest sort of driver story to talk about from this race is Ricciardo, who had, I would say, other than his win for McLaren in Monza, probably his best weekend since he left Renault. Honestly, like, I can't think, other than his win, I can't think of a race weekend this good in his time at McLaren. He was just on it, like, from the start, like, all the way through practice, he was right on the pace. P4 on the grid is just...
It's ridiculous, isn't
it?
Where has that even come
for that
from?
car as well, that's the other bit of it, isn't it? It's,
and if you're Christian Horner, you're going, well, put him in the Red Bull.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the car that 2-3 days ago was bottom of the constructor standings, and he's stuck at P4 on the grid, like, unbelievable. Finished P7 in the race in the end, really close to chasing down Russell for P6. He probably needed another lap or two. I mean, he was, until the red flag sort of hurt him. He might have even pulled off a P5 if not for the red flag timing. But yeah, like, such a good drive. And I think in the same way that race kind of told a bit of a story of Perez's career, I think this kind of tells a bit of a story of Ricciardo as well, because clearly this car and these upgrades and this setup, he said himself, like, it's clicked for him. Like, the car's doing what he needs it to do. He's got that feel on turning that he needs. He's got the feel on the brakes that he needs. And that's kind of Ricciardo down to a T. Like, when you give him a car that suits him, he's one of the fastest out there. As soon as the car's out of the window for him, he's kind of nowhere.
He becomes average, doesn't he? He goes from... give him the right car, he's a superstar. Give him not quite the right car, then he can become quite average quite quickly, as we saw at McLaren.
Yeah,
but
he's a talented driver, isn't he? We all know that. It's more that he's a little bit more sensitive to setup, essentially. But I mean, I think you could say that about some of the great drivers. To be fair, like,
totally.
I mean, even Vettel was phenomenal with the way that Red Bull was set up. Yeah. But he never really found that form at Ferrari and at Aston, because the car was never... They don't design the cars in the same way that Newey does, and it just never fell into his driving style. Whereas at least at Alfa Tauri, for example, for Daniel Ricciardo, it's somewhat descendant from a Red Bull, so it might not be the same, but it's somewhat descendant, which means it probably fits his style and his preference much better than some of the other things he's had in recent years.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think that's maybe what sets kind of one of the things that sets your Verstappens, Hamiltons, Schumachers, I could go on, of the world apart, is that the window in which they can achieve that greatness is much bigger than your sort of Ricciardo's, Vettels of the world, I think.
It's why I rate Norris in his current form, because I think that McLaren has gone through at least 2, if not 3 different philosophies in Norris's time there. And he's got performance out of every single one of those and dispatched teammates like Daniel Ricciardo in the process. It just goes to show he's got great adaptability, I think.
And he hasn't even reached his final form.
No.
mean, I know it's been a long time since Ricciardo was at Red Bull, but I don't think there's been a car that suits the way Ricciardo likes to drive more in his career than when he was at Red Bull.
Yeah, agree.
And, things have changed a lot in those years, but even so, as you said, Stu, they just have to be looking at him for that seat because I just don't know how much longer that can persist with the problems they're having with Perez.
Well, and persist with this sort of, this sideshow of, he's got a contract for 2 years, blah, blah, blah. We all know that these contracts are not worth the paper they're written on. As soon as you're not performing, you're gone. And I am absolutely amazed that Perez has lasted as long as he has this season at Red Bull. I really am surprised that they have. I think if they hadn't been so far ahead with Verstappen and in the constructors as a result, I think he'd be long gone. Yeah, I think they would have got. They'd have been trying Tsunoda, or they'd have had Ricciardo maybe straight back in there, maybe even Lawson or someone like that in there to give them a shot, because he's just not doing. He's not. I hate to say it. He has been a great driver, but this year he's just not doing the job in that car. He's not doing a good enough job. So they would be mad not to be considering other drivers for that seat. It's the best seat on the grid. So
because as soon as they have some competition at the front,
well, I mean, you've only got to look at how close Hamilton is now. Hamilton started the season with an absolute dog of a car, and they've upgraded it throughout the season, and he's now
still a dog by all accounts.
Well, I mean, it's still far from what the Red Bull is. It's a long way from what the Red Bull is. Yet he's only 20 points behind Perez. Now after this weekend.
If he'd not been disqualified last race, wouldn't he not be? Where did Perez finish?
He'd probably be ahead by now.
If not ahead, he'd be only like a handful of points
behind.
Yeah,
it'd be a much smaller gap.
Discord are saying 1 point.
1 point behind, So,
Wow. That's just mad, isn't it?
Yeah. Like that story in itself just tells you what you need to know, I think.
But I think, I don't think anyone's questioning whether or not who the better driver is of that.
No, but I think it's not necessarily that. I think it just highlights how poor Perez's results have actually been. And I think this weekend shows that maybe there's a bit more to it than we thought, because for a long time I've been saying, if he sorts out his qualifying form and he gets to starting back near the front of the pack, he can mix it with them at the front and get the results that he was getting at the start of the season. This has maybe proven otherwise, that despite him looking on form and getting some of his pace back and being able to qualify up the front, he can't now race wheel to wheel with them at the front like he could before. So maybe the problem is deeper than just he's had issues in qualifying and therefore he's having to fight through the field. But I guess that's been slowly unravelling over the last few races anyway, because of what we've seen of his racecraft. Like, since Singapore, he's hit somebody in every single race, I believe. if you put it like that,
Okay, so the big question here then, which I'm going to ask you both. I'm going to quick fire answers, please. Does he throw in the towel at the end of the season, or is he given the boot?
I think it's a boot if he goes, because I don't think any driver's going to throw in the towel.
What do you think, Chris?
I think publicly he's going to throw in the towel.
Yeah,
I think he will be asked very firmly if he thinks retirement might be the best choice for him right now.
Yeah, I think... so you're saying a little from column A, a little from column B, Chris.
I think he's going to get booted, but I think they're going to give him the opportunity to do it on his own terms.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. I think we're all in agreement there. I think we all think he's getting the boot. I think, don't we?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay, Mercedes.
Just quickly, just to mop up a last bit of AlphaTauri stuff. A massive result for them getting those points from Ricciardo. it's lifted them off the bottom of the table into P8 now, ahead of Alfa Romeo and Haas. Could have been even better for them, but Tsunoda had that clash with Piastri that dropped him out of the points. I mean, you could see that coming a mile off, couldn't you? Like, he'd already had a couple of goes at Piastri, and it was all very squirrely. And then he just turned in like he wasn't there.
Yeah, there was a ghost
poor
of driving
past.
standards.
There were some very rogue driving standards this weekend, I thought. Dare I say, I thought Tsunoda, who's had a very good season by all measures, I thought this race, Tsunoda looked a bit like his past self. And I wonder if the pressure of Ricciardo doing such a good job maybe made him lose his head a little bit.
Possibly.
I don't want to draw an instant conclusion from one result, but I see the deduction you're making.
Yes. There's definitely a hint of that to keep an eye on, I think.
Yeah,
for sure.
But yes, we'll move to Mercedes. Great drive from Hamilton, sixth on the grid to another second place, which he's actually kept this time. Also picked up fastest lap on the last lap, I think, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah,
it was.
As we said, close that gap to Perez now to only 20 points for second in the drivers.
And when Perez retires at the next race and Hamilton wins it, then he'll be ahead by 5 points.
Job done. Great drive from Hamilton. Like, really, like, well managed. Some big overtakes when he needed them. Sticking a couple of wheels on the grass to pass Leclerc was particularly exciting.
Yeah.
Again, another example of some slightly ropey defensive driving that we saw a lot of this
There was
race,
some awful defensive driving. That, I mean, again, that was so. If someone did that to Leclerc would be very, very unhappy. If someone did that to me on a sim, I'd be very, very, very unhappy. If someone did that to you, Tom, where you were sim racing, I don't think you'd be too pleased with it.
I mean, someone did do it to me on a roundabout yesterday and like pushed me onto the curb of the roundabout. So I know exactly how I feel. Yeah, in real life.
was it Charles Leclerc?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a red Ferrari. No, it definitely wasn't a Ferrari.
Imagine.
It was a Ford Fiesta, but still.
Less good race for Russell. He had brake and tyre temperature issues most of the race. He moved up 2 places in the race, one from Perez retiring and one from when he passed Ricciardo at the restart. But then he almost lost that position to Ricciardo later on. It was a very Russell this season race, really. He was like there or thereabouts, but Hamilton's definitely getting a lot more out of that car than him at the moment.
Yeah, right
for
now.
Sure.
It looks that way for sure, yeah. He's, quite anonymous to me, Russell, in this race. I don't know whether it's because there was a bit more going on elsewhere, but it just seemed to be a bit of an also-ran in this race.
He's had a lot of that this year where he's just kind of landed in a bit of no man's land and sort of done his own thing in, fifth.
Yeah.
I would say not as anonymous as Ferrari, though, who for the second race in a row went from pole position to being like also rans in the space of 2 corners.
Yeah.
They went 1-2 on the grid, which we have to talk about, popping up 1-2 in qualifying. Like, what a weird qualifying session that was.
Well, I mean, just I could not figure that out. Like, it felt like the
Ferrari couldn't figure it out.
the track evolved somewhat and maybe started to fall away, but because that car's harder on its tyres, they were able to extract that bit more from the track.
Possibly,
maybe.
yeah.
It felt like the track was falling away to me watching quali on Saturday night.
1-2 drivers improved on their final runs, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, they might have been the Ferraris. In fact, I don't think
Sainz
it
wasn't.
Didn't. Yeah.
No, I think it was... Oh, no, because, Piastri hadn't put a lap in, so he moved up the times just because he put in a lap time. And I think maybe one of the Mercedes improved a position. But otherwise, like, everybody went slower on the last run. It was, weird. But yeah, they turned a 1-2 into a 3-4. Kind of odd strategy they went to. They sort of did the thing where they stuck to their plan and just didn't react to what anyone else was doing. It felt like the second they lost the lead at the start, they didn't even try to fight Max and just worried about, which I suppose logically is maybe the right thing to do, but
They know they're not quicker than Max. They know they're not beating Max. So you just have to worry about what's going on behind you. And they're right. Excuse me. They're right to worry about what's going on behind them because you've got a Mercedes behind you that seems to be quite kind to its tyres in comparison to Ferrari, who at this stage of the season still haven't got on top of, for all the accounts that maybe they thought they had. I don't think they have got on top of their tyre wear issues.
Which is probably why they put on hards at the red flag restart rather than mediums, but it just left them completely vulnerable to Hamilton, really.
Well, the other thing is as well, by putting those on, that's probably all they had left. There were a few drivers that were quite limited on tyres at that point in the race as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't have any other sets that they could put on the cars.
I think at least Leclerc had the option of mediums if he wanted them.
Oh, really?
I think.
We were only halfway at the point that it happened, though, weren't we? So
and you have to run both tyres.
Yeah, I think the plan was to try and go to the end and not have to stop. Whereas with the mediums, they would. I think that was the idea, but it's weird with Ferrari. Pole is a bad thing for them. Doesn't matter which of them it is either. At the minute, it feels like. Although having said that, Carlos has converted a couple of poles into wins.
Yeah, Leclerc has had, of his last 10 pole positions, none of them have been converted into wins.
And I think Sainz has 5, but only 2 wins from them, if I remember right.
Wild, isn't it?
I can't remember if all 5 of those are Ferrari poles, though. They might not all be Ferrari poles. I don't think he got one at McLaren, did he?
I don't know.
Maybe.
But
my point is they'd probably be better lifting off and starting second.
Yeah. I saw before the race, where is it? So 18% of Verstappen's total wins have come from Leclerc being on pole. And Verstappen has converted 42% of Leclerc's poles into wins for himself. That was before this race, so those numbers are even higher now.
Wow,
that's funny.
Bizarre.
That is a really, really enjoyable stat.
It's so funny,
especially if you're a Max Verstappen fan like me. McLaren. Should we talk about
McLaren? Kind of botched qualifying. Lando out in Q1. They sort of brought him in when he was on a hot lap, left him with they left him with 2 chances. One of them was kind of ruined by Alonso's spin, and then Lando himself made a mistake on the 1 lap that he got in Q1. Left him out. Bit of a balls of ball round, really. However, boy, did he make up for it. I've seen several people say that might be Norris's best drive in F1, certainly up there with his best.
It was mighty. He made it entertaining, didn't he? When we saw him, when we got to see him, he made it entertaining. We didn't see much of him, annoyingly, but
yeah, we needed him in that race. Yes, he's the only driver to start on softs. He was up to P14 by his first stop. He made it as high as 8th, and then they pitted him right before the red flag came out, which cost him a couple of places.
Yeah.
Had a terrible restart, mostly because he was avoiding people trying to crash into him on the run to turn 1. And then, in that final stint, he climbed from 14th up to 5th. Again, making some super cool passes on the way. Such a good drive.
Yeah, very good driver. Very good drive.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what he could have done had he qualified properly.
Yeah.
Should have been on the podium, I think. I think he was disappointed,
so
wasn't he? In the interviews afterwards, he was visibly and audibly disappointed in himself for not qualifying better because, I think it's a valid sort of feeling.
What was he? He was 5 seconds off Sainz and 10 seconds off Leclerc. So I think at that point, with where he started and getting scuppered by the pit stops, that's a podium.
Yeah.
Quite comfortably, I think.
Yeah.
Also, interestingly, at least for one of his pit stops, they told him not to launch out of the pit box, to crawl out on this pit stop because they were so worried about temperatures.
Right.
They were just basically don't launch the car because that's just putting unnecessary heat into it. We'll take the sort of second that'll lose us over the car massively overheating.
Yeah, well, you lose a lot more once those tyres and once that heat gets up and it soaks into everything. it's can be very difficult, especially at high. Can't speak. Can be very difficult, especially at high altitude, to get those temperatures back down as well. So smart move from McLaren.
Anything to say on Piastri? Sort of.
Started 7th, finished 8th.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, not an awful race, but also not a brilliant one.
Yeah.
A very interesting battle with Tsunoda. I think that was probably the main point Piastri stood out to me during the race, was the 3 laps or so that they kept wheel banging with each other, and then that eventually ended up with Tsunoda backwards, didn't it?
Piastri's defensive driving was very good, but you can't really defend against someone just turning their car into the side.
That wasn't a finger pointing accusation or anything. It was more just that was about as much as I remember of Piastri from the races, those battles. So,
then the last few teams, just to kind of clean up before we move on to things. Williams had such a weird weekend. Like they were. Albon was second in practice 1 and 3. Then he went out in Q2 and they just couldn't find pace to save their lives. He managed to get up to 8th in the race. I think he was another one that pitted in that one lap when it was a safety car before the red flag, which screwed him a bit. But yeah, weird one for Williams.
Bottas did the same. I think Bottas pitted just before the safety car as well.
Yeah, both the Alfa Romeos kind of had unlucky pit stop timings around the safety car and the red flag. Sargent weirdly retired at the end of the last lap. He was running, I think, 14th and pulled into the pits instead of crossing the line. I believe
it was fuel pump.
They said there's a fuel pump issue that they were worried was going to then start causing damage to the power unit, so they just got him to stop as quick as possible. Which I'm sure some people in the Predictions League will have been very upset about, because that went down as a DNF and not a finisher. Tom being one of them. We just mentioned Alfa Romeo. They made a Q3. I mean, they always seem to go well here, that car. They had their upgrades. They made Q3, but race pace still missing. As we said, unlucky around the pit stop timing. And then, we kind of already mentioned it, but to cap it all off, Bottas and Stroll came together in the stadium section, for which Bottas was given a 5-second penalty and 2 penalty points. And I just don't...
Bizarre.
I just don't see where they've got that from.
I've watched the replay
fair enough. Stroll kind of made an opportunistic dive and got himself alongside. In fact, slightly ahead. Stroll was there or thereabouts. Fair enough. But then he just sort of took the next corner like Bottas wasn't there, and he still was there. He just sort of seemed to expect him to disappear. I don't see how they've come to the conclusion that that's Bottas's fault.
Yeah, I don't really get how. Unless they want him to cut the corner down the inside and then just completely compromise the. And then
I'll give him a 5-second penalty for cutting the corner.
Yeah, what else do they want him to do? He's doing his best to stay on the track while Lance Stroll is completely pushing him out there. And, I just...
Weird.
I'd maybe call it a racing incident, but I definitely wouldn't put any... I wouldn't necessarily go as far to say Stroll needs a penalty for it, but... I would call it a racing incident.
That is the very definition of a racing incident for me, I think. They were racing and there was an incident. That's kind of it.
You know what this situation is again? It's a classic thing that winds me up. Visual. It's because of the situation the drivers ended up in. Because Lance Stroll has split. If that had been contact and it had just been wheel banging with a couple of broken front wing, like an end plate damage like what Bottas got, that would not have been questioned whatsoever. Because Stroll has spun, Bottas has been given a penalty, even though it's Stroll's own fault he's spun, in reality, for throwing it up the inside on a part of track that we all know is incredibly tight, and then expecting Bottas to just drive off the circuit to avoid him.
The car to disappear. He was expecting Bottas' car to just disappear, and it's just not how...
Yeah.
That's not how it works. Cars don't just disappear once you've overtaken them. They don't ghost out. You've got to allow them. He was still he still had 2 wheels on the track. He was still absolutely valid in his positioning of his car.
Yeah,
it's up to Stroll to to leave space for the car that you've just overtaken, and he just totally failed. I think it's characteristic of Stroll's driving lately. He's been, I think, across the last couple of years, he's made a few howlers like this, and I think this is just yet another one of those for Stroll.
Yeah.
He's not a happy
Very
guy
much
at
so.
the moment, I don't think, Stroll, and I think it is showing in some of his on-track antics.
Yeah, I mean, Aston Martin had
Yeah.
another shocker of a weekend. That could only get 13th and 18th on the grid. It ended up in a double DNF. No points for the second time
20
this
points
season.
behind McLaren now.
They just, their upgrades just continue
it's
to be
weird.
downgrades.
Like, everything they've
Yeah.
got in the car makes it go slower.
Really weird.
Like, how is that?
They just don't seem to understand. Clearly, there's something between the Winterland CFD and the parts going in the car is just
there's lack
not
of
correlating.
isn't there? Right then, shall we move on to driver of the day?
Let's.
Who is your driver of the day?
I find it hard to look
I
past
was going to say the same
Norris.
thing, which Tom will be very pleased about, because I'm sure resident Norris fan will be voting for Norris after that drive.
Yeah.
I think I will.
He says in his Aston Martin hat.
For there to be a resident Lando Norris fan on this podcast, he must be a real big fan.
Move.
Actually, that's a good point.
Move
So being the
of the
resident
day.
Button fan.
We've got a couple listed. We've got Hamilton on Leclerc, Norris on
I-
Ricciardo, and Norris on Russell as well. I like the Norris on Russell one.
I also find it hard to look past Norris again.
Norris on Ricciardo was the one where he took it round the outside through one of the chicanes, wasn't it, initially?
Yeah, turn
Outbraked him round the
4.
outside of 4 and then won it on the inside of 5. That was the one that was up there for me, I think. That was like the one where, as I saw it live, I was like, that's probably my vote for move of the day there. It'll take something special to beat that, was kind of how I was thinking at the time.
I think I prefer his move on Russell slightly, because it was Norris approached it forcing Russell to always be in the wrong position going through that sequence, and then sort of put Russell out of place and then snuck up the inside. Like, it was a really well planned, well executed move. Do you have a preference, Stu?
Technically, like,
For me,
beautiful,
it's
let's say.
Norris on Russell, because there was a bit of a build up to it, and there was some close wheel to wheel racing, and eventually got it down the inside. Whatever turn it was, turn 5, I think.
I think it was 4 and
Either
5
way.
again, wasn't it? Yeah.
It's Norris.
He forced him to defend in 4 so heavily that it compromised his line in 5, I think.
Yeah, it's
Good sequence of
pretty good
corners,
for a track that
Yeah.
we don't like very much. It's decent sequence of corners.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is what I was mentioning at the top of the show, just like the first sector is pretty good. Like into turn 1 and then that bit at 4 and 5, that like sort of little chicane type thing. Like, I think that section is great. Promotes overtaking. I mean, yes, fair enough, they've both got DRS in the lead up to them, but it's 4 and 5 particularly is DRS getting someone in position, but then they are still having to make the move on the braking and at the apex of the corner. It's not just like a fly-by situation. It's like the perfect example of how DRS should
it should get you
working.
alongside. It
And
shouldn't
I
let
do
you
like
pass,
that bit.
right? It should be side by side by the brake
Exactly,
zone,
yeah.
or just under side by the brake zone, and have to get the defender on the brakes.
And I think Norris was the one that exploited that the best. And probably Hamilton the second,
next
I
one.
would say. Oh,
Sorry,
it's that,
I
isn't
was
it? I forgot about that.
Honestly, what the f*** are we doing
Yes,
here?
we've got a few. Cutting from a live battle on the final lap to see Max drive the last few corners. I know they're like kind of contractually obliged to show the winning car go through at least the last few corners, and you do have to show the winner going over the line, I think. But at the same time, they do have the facility these days to do like picture in picture and things like that. Why not take advantage of that?
I was about to say we could at least have the famous bingo square from Discord of action in the tiny box.
Action,
Yeah.
Like, come on. Yeah, like at minimum, that's what we should be getting, I think.
You could practically hear like everyone
Groaning
around the world
collectively,
watching that,
yeah.
like screaming at their
Yeah,
TV.
there's the
in unison.
collective global groan of, 'Cause he was only just entering like the third sector at the point they cut to him. He had so much of the lap to do still.
I think at any other track they'd probably have waited as late as they could until he was like in the final corner. But I think because of this track, they were like, "Oh, we've got to show the winner going through the stadium." On the last lap.
That's what it is.
So it made it feel that much worse.
We've got lots of dodgy defensive driving. Plenty of that, and we've already spoke about Bottas and his penalty, which just should not have been a penalty. And then nobody given penalties for impeding in qualifying, despite what was said. And I think this is my favourite one. They said in Singapore that if it happened, they made a mistake, and if it happened again, there would definitely be penalties. And they once again did verbal gymnastics to get themselves out of giving anyone any penalties. I think probably because Max Verstappen did the same thing again, and also Russell did the same thing.
I do feel slightly sorry for the stewards here because we have rotating panels of stewards. It's never the same race to race. And basically the stewards in Singapore with that statement essentially said, we made a mess of this. It's now up to future stewards to sort this out. Good luck with that. So I feel like the stewards here were backed into a corner a little bit. And I think the point they made was valid in the drivers backing up people at the pit exit were creating gaps at the pit exit to avoid having to try and create a gap in the final sector, which is where we always see a mess. And the stewards were like, we don't see a solution to this problem, but we need to find one, which I completely agree with. And is it better to have cars being backed up in the pit exit than through the final sector?
No, because, safety-wise, yes, that is that you would prefer that. But, surely... I mean, it's up to the teams when they release their cars from the garage. If there's a queue at the end of the pit lane, why would you release your car from the garage to just get in a queue? That seems strange to me. But then also, you wouldn't really necessarily expect there to be a queue at the end of the pit lane because the rules say that you're not allowed to stop in the pit lane. So, and that's the rules, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know the exact wording of the rule, but
you're
not supposed to stop in the fast lane on the pit lane because it's a pit lane. You're supposed to stop in your box.
Yeah,
there's as much of a minimum speed as there is a maximum speed for the fast lane, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but I believe there's a minimum speed as well as a maximum speed.
And surely if you want to come to a stop at the pit exit, there's space off to the right for you to do that, but leave space for anyone who wants to just go out.
They're quite obviously stopping to block other drivers and to make their own space. I think they are genuinely trying to make their own space still, but at the expense of other drivers is not on. Like they should be pulling over to one side.
That's the thing, isn't it? I don't think it's like an intentional. I'm going to block this person behind me. It's I want the space in front of me with zero regard for if anyone's behind me. Like it's not I'm going to block this guy. It's I'm going to make my space if you're behind me
because I'm going to be in your way because I don't want you taking up the space that I want.
Yeah, it's just selfishness. It's not like...
It's not malicious.
I don't know. We need to... it's not malicious against whoever's behind them is what I guess I'm trying to get at. But it is getting silly. And to say that we're going to do something about it one race and then leave it up to the stewards at a different race to then have to deal with it and get in this situation is... quite typical FIA silliness.
I mean, it's just more evidence to show that we
very
need
much
consistent stewards throughout the entire season. How
exactly? Yes,
I repeat again and again. I've said it so many times on here. How do we not have consistent stewards across the sport, like across the season? It's just strange.
I think the thing is that this weekend as well with the Mexico GP, it was worse than what was happening in Singapore. Like in Singapore, it was just kind of slowing down to a crawl and then kind of rolling on a bit, like they were in traffic in your average road car, just like kind of crawling along at their own pace because the traffic's moving slowly. Whereas this weekend, it was like Russell and Verstappen were basically both just parked on the white line at the exit of the pits, like going, I'm not entering the live track until there's a space for me. Like, it was just blatant, like, stopping on the line, blocking people, which is even worse.
Yeah, ridiculous.
I don't know.
They need to get a grip on it.
Do we know the
somehow.
solution? Are we going to come up with a solution here?
I don't know what
now?
the solution
I don't think
is.
we are.
No.
But maybe one to think about.
I mean, the solution is to give them the penalties that they're threatening them with, because all that's going to happen now is someone will do it again, because they've gone from one extreme to another, and still no penalties have been applied, despite it being said that they were going to be investigated after the session. But again, that in itself is ridiculous. Why investigate them after the session? Do it there on the spot. Like, if he's doing the impeding, I can see him doing the impeding. Yeah. Why do we need to wait until after the session? Like, but as well, if he gets through, to whatever the next qualifying session is at that point, and another driver misses out but would have got in for that, the lap time being deleted or a penalty being applied or whatever it might be. That is not fair to the driver that's missed out on the top 10 or getting out of Q1 or whatever that situation actually is. Yeah. So, it's that's even bigger silliness. Actually, is that we'll look at it after the session when it's unfolding.
Well, I think we have a winner
in front of them.
I think we have a winner there.
Yeah. This is the one we've ranted about for the longest.
Let's have a quick young driver check-in before we move on to predictions and what.
Yeah, as is often the case, we had a lot of the young drivers running in Mexico this year. We had 5 in FP1. Teo Pourchaire in Alfa Romeo, Jack Doohan for Alpine, Frederick Vesti for Mercedes, Isaac Hadjar for Tauri, and Ollie Behrman for Haas. Ollie Behrman, definitely the standout one of the bunch there. Finished ahead of Alonso when he was within half a second of Hulkenberg in the same car.
He's rapid, man.
He's
going to go
good
far.
showing for him. Yeah. Him and Antonelli in F2 next year is going to be spicy. Yeah. They've already said he's going to get another FP1 in Abu Dhabi, where it's looking like FP1 in Abu Dhabi, like half the grid's going to be young drivers. Which will be really good fun.
Interesting.
A couple of notes to mention. Pato Award IndyCar driver is going to be driving for McLaren again, as he did last year. And Red Bull are... So every team has to run a young driver in both of their cars at least once throughout the season. Red Bull are just doing both at once in FP1 in Abu Dhabi. So neither of their race drivers are going to do practice one.
5 races ago, I think that's...
Well, exactly, yeah.
That's perfectly doable, yeah.
Do what you want.
Just enter him for the rest of the season. Max has got his race record.
I'm sure Max would love that.
The last thing Perez needs is more young drivers getting a run. So they're going to be running Isaac Hadjar, who is in the AlphaTauri this weekend. And the second seat's going to go to Jake Dennis, reigning Formula E champion, which is very cool to see. He's been a simulator driver for Red Bull for a good few years now, I think, on top of his... race duties. So that'll be really cool to see him.
Tom, do you want to take us rapidly through predictions, please?
Yes, not much to say in the way of us. We just got a Verstappen win because that's all we're good at. In terms of out there, though, John Matheson was our winner this week with 4 out of 5. Correctly getting Leclerc's pole, Max Verstappen's win, Sergio Perez's first DNF, and the random finish. The number of finishes being 15, just scuppered by Ricciardo's finishing position there. In terms of the overall standings, that leaves Effortlessly still at the top on 41.5 points, and then Kirsty Bradshaw and Dagan Dushami are both tied on 39.5 as well. So all very close at the top. With what have we got now? 3 races to go. So all to play for there. 4 to go. Sorry.
It's 3.
No, 3. It's 3.
Isn't it? 3. It's Brazil, Las Vegas, Abu Dhabi.
Brazil? Huh.
Well, I want to know
so it is.
I want to know what Chris's 4th race is.
So do I.
The only thing I can think that you're looking at is the total number of races we've had, and thinking that there should be 4 added to that.
No,
which would be right because Emilia Romagna we didn't run.
Let's
So maybe
I
you're
can tell you it was
looking at the total.
Oh, there we go. Sarah in the chat saved me. I was thinking of the sprint race. Technically, we do have 4 races to go
So
because
it
there's a
was
sprint
worth
in
running Chris
Brazil.
over the coals.
It's not a
Eventually
race,
it
it's
was
a
worth running
sprint.
Chris over the coals on that one. Okay, storylines going into Brazil.
Right.
This will be another weak track for Red Bull, one of the very few they were beaten at last season. At a time when Mercedes do look to be a little bit resurgent, could we see a Hamilton or a Russell victory at Brazil next week? Yeah, this week. Yeah. What do you think?
I think there's an argument to throw Norris in that mix as well. Like if with the pace he was on this weekend and how they've looked in recent races, I think that they get qualifying right and they're up near that front row. There's again with what they showed in the US, which was a track we thought might not suit them because of the bumps, and to still perform like they did. I think there's an argument that he could be in the mix with Hamilton.
Do we see Hamilton getting ahead of Perez? We've got a few big fights with three races to go. So we've got Hamilton on 20 points behind Perez. Norris can still catch Sainz and Alonso for 4th. He's 14 points behind both of them. Thank you for putting this together, Chris, by the way. Aston are 20 points behind McLaren for 4th, but only falling further behind. I don't think that one's a go for Aston. Huge fight at the bottom of the table for the final 4 positions and millions in prize money. As it stands, we've got Haas on 12 points, Alfa Romeo and Valtteri on 16, and Williams on 28. So keep your eyes peeled for wherever that one's going.
Yeah. It kind of feels like AlphaTauri, despite being bottom for most of the season, have kind of got most momentum of those 4 teams at the moment.
Yeah.
Like I can see them catching Williams is a big ask. 12 points in 3 races for them.
Well, if Ricciardo keeps finishing 7th, then
Yeah.
well, yeah, that's true. Do we think Hamilton
I
can
think he
catch
can.
Perez?
I'd say so. At the minute, he will.
6-7 points over him per race now.
Yeah, I think current form is evident, isn't it? And I think it's easily doable at the moment. With the time we've got left in the season, I just can't see Perez getting back into form. I just think his head's gone at this point with what he
Feels
did
like
this
it, doesn't it?
weekend. It's just
yeah,
too
I
much.
think so. I think that's going to be a really interesting one for the end of the season. Now, I think that's what our season's kind of boiling down to, isn't it? Is that battle for second place? That's what's going to make it interesting.
Yeah, I think the Norris to Sainz and Alonso one's an interesting one as well. I didn't realise how close he'd actually gotten to them.
He's really.
So I think that's an interesting one. I think Alonso's clearly out of that, unfortunately, but I think it's between Norris and Sainz to fight for that one, which is going to be really interesting because they race well with each other as well. Like, you know, they've got a lot of time for each other, a lot of respect for each other, which leads to good on-track battles usually. So if they're to see them fight on track for that position, I think will be really good over these last few races.
With all that in mind, we should make some predictions for the Brazilian Grand Prix.
Yes. Our final part of the triple header.
It's been a long,
Thankfully.
Well, we've got another podcast. We've got another episode to record after it, but yeah.
Yeah, the last of the intense back-to-back ones, though, thankfully.
Yes.
So, right, let's go with fastest qualifier, fastest in Q3. Chris, where do you want to go with this one?
Gonna have to rush you, Chris. Podcasts don't work very well
Hamilton.
when it's just silent, as we learned earlier in the episode.
You are the king of delaying. At
You
this
can
point in the
talk while I'm
podcast.
doing it. I don't just sit there in silence. I'm going to go
Head in
I'm gonna go
hands.
Hamilton as well, I think.
Oh, okay. Do you know what? If there's a point where the Red Bulls looked fallible at the moment, it probably isn't qualifying. So, yeah, I'm going to go with a Norris pole, but a Verstappen win.
Ooh.
I'm going to go with it. The race pace has still been there. How about wins for you two? I mean, I'll make you go next because
I think Hamilton can win it. I think that the car is looking a bit better since they upgraded it. I think they've had a full sort of proper race weekend. I'm giving Chris a bit of time to think of his answer here. A full proper race weekend to get to grips with with some proper practice sessions to really understand this new upgrade. So, and I think it showed in the race. I think Hamilton drove really, really well during the race, and I think if they can just qualify well, they could be in the battle for a victory at Brazil. So yeah, why not?
So after all that filibustering on behalf of Chris, are you saying Hamilton?
Yeah.
Good. Just checking. Chris?
Yeah, I think I'm going to brisk it on a Hamilton as well.
A double?
Whoa.
Wow. The last time we had a couple of double hams must have been, what,
More double hams at
2019 or
McDonald's.
something?
Next one.
Right. First DNF. Stu, you can go first overall on this one.
Could it be Verstappen? Could this be his one retirement? I think I might say Verstappen. Because then that makes my Hamilton win.
That plays into your Hamilton
likely,
situation a little better. Yeah. Chris?
I'm going to say Tsunoda, if he drives anything like he was driving in Mexico.
I'm going to go with a driver who's on for a triple of DNFs, and that's Kevin Magnussen.
Ooh, yeah, he's on a rough patch.
Not on great form lately.
Yeah, we should point out it was brakes
Yeah.
that sent Magnussen off.
Oh yeah, not necessarily his fault, but he's on for a
Nasty
hat trick of
accident,
DNFs.
actually
So
mentioned that, actually.
it was quite scary getting launched into the wall like that. But yeah, number of finishers. I'll go first on this one. I'm going to go with steady old 17. Chris
16.
and Stu.
Ooh. I almost did a Chris and sat in silence for an extended period of time there. I'm going to go 17. I want to join you on 17. I know we tried to all predict something different for that, but I think 17 is the most realistic.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, that one, though, isn't it? Because it is usually around that kind of number. And then, Chris, I think we've only got one driver left in the random pot, haven't we?
We have. It is
Charles
Charles Leclerc.
Wow, as if we had Chucky this season. Wow. Right, let's
do some quick
just
maths.
all.
So he's not qualifying on pole because I don't think the Ferrari's going to be that quick around here. I think he's probably qualifying somewhere around third or fourth, I would say. So let's say
third or fourth. I think he's probably going to go backwards a place or two.
I think it's fifth or sixth. I'm going to go.
Which one are you going for? I'll go for the other.
I'm going
you go for one, I'll go for
I think
the other.
Beat Perez,
I know which one I'm going for already.
Okay, I'm going to go sixth then because I see very similar logic to you.
I was thinking fifth as well.
Very good.
Okay.
I'm thinking like Hamilton, Verstappen, Norris, Russell ahead of him probably.
Yeah, I think the battle behind the top three is actually quite interesting and spicy. Like it's good. You got your Piastris, you got your Ricciardos, you got your PS2. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah. Right. If you want to get involved with that, it's always worth doing because if you can get all 5 of these correct in a race weekend, you're up for a prize. So head to backofthegrid.com. Even if you've not entered throughout the season up to now, you might not be in the running for that overall title, but you'll at least be in the running for a 5 out of 5 if you can get them all correct. There's also information there on how to get involved with our fantasy leagues. We do one called Grid Rival, and we also do the official F1 Fantasy League. So you can find details of both those as well.
Inbox.
Keep me saying now. But stay out. Box. Hey, man.
I'll take this first one. It's from Corey Zilla Zombie Killer. He says, so let's talk about that Magnussen crash. When he first got out of the car, it looked like he took a much bigger impact than it did on the reply. I'm wondering if it's...
Replay.
Should we replay that? It's not a correct issue there.
On the replay. I'm wondering if it's because he hit the wall at an awkward angle or because it was pretty much a hit and stop impact. I think he looked a bit winded.
Very winded.
Where he went and sat scared me a lot. Because he sort of went and sat in between the two Tech Pro barriers, and I was just thinking to myself, God, if someone does the same incident or goes into that bit of barrier while you're there, that's not going to be pretty. So So that was that.
Yeah.
That scared me a lot.
I do agree, though, like, seeing the aftermath and the state the car was in first, I was expecting it to be a much bigger accident than what it actually turned out to be, seeing the replays. But still a big old hit. It was a nasty crash. It was about the worst place
High speed.
you want to have a suspension failure. No, his
Oh, did it? I didn't realize.
suspension went. If you watch the replay from behind, you see as he's in the corner, his left rear just turns left
that's horrible.
on its own. Because he had that off at the final corner at the beginning of the same lap, which I think was either the beginning of the problem showing itself or possibly the cause of it.
Yeah, damage. It was a really scary one.
Yeah, it was a scary one.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's one of those where it's probably caught him off guard as well. Like, when you lose the car normally, it's like you can feel it going underneath you, and you maybe attempt to catch it, and so, like, do you know what I mean? There's a bit more time to react. What happened there with a suspension failure is pretty sudden. Like, it's just gone, and I think that was it. And you saw him sort of like kind of shaking his wrists, because I think he was still maybe trying to fight it, holding onto the wheel at the time that it hit the wall. And obviously, when they've got the time to brace, you tend to see them take the hands off and kind of across the chest to keep them out of the way. And I think that just it was so fast that he didn't get time to react, and it was just a bit of a adrenaline shook up, and probably some sore body parts from it being a big hit. But yeah.
Not
much more to say than
that.
that.
Should we do the next one?
No.
Next one from, I'm going to say that's Varles. Yes.
Yes.
How soon are we thinking Ricciardo will be announced in that second Red Bull seat? 2025, 2024, end of the season announcement, exactly one day after this podcast comes out.
Yeah.
Exactly one day after this podcast comes out. It's always the right case,
That's how things normally go. I think just over the winter. I don't think they'll rush it. There's no need for them to. Or will they let Perez do it on his own terms and have a last race, I suppose, is the question.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see it was getting to Vegas, and maybe Perez announces his retirement in Vegas, and this is really harsh to be saying, isn't it? But maybe he announces his retirement in Vegas, and he has a send-off at Abu Dhabi and rides off into the sunset.
Honestly, there's still a part of me that thinks he might just
I
be
just
in the car
can't
next
see it.
year
Like,
still.
that'd be crazy.
That would be the
really
biggest
don't
shock
think
in the
it's a done-
scenario. Do you not think that?
It would. I still don't think it's a done deal. I don't think it's 100% yet.
I just think they'd be bonkers not to put one of these other clearly better drivers in there.
I think you're going to end up eating those words after we hit stop, Chris.
Probably.
That's the kind of statement that the moment we hit stop tonight prompts
Yeah,
a tweet from a team.
I'm going to refresh Twitter constantly until we're...
Till we're clear,
next one.
till we're
Let's
live.
finish off.
Yeah, next one. Charlie Brigden says, "Hey man, do you think Esteban Ocon is the kind of guy to text you when he's 5 minutes away, but then show up 20 minutes later? Or do you think he's only like that when he's working?"
What?
That radio message is so weird.
know what we're talking
It was
about.
just so Ocon was chasing Hulkenberg, I think it was, and he basically went on the radio to his engineer and said, "Call Haas and tell them I'm coming," and then proceeded
to send it or something.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what the wording was, but it was it proceeded to be a number of laps before he was even close. It was just
So they did.
It was weird.
And Haas responded. It was like,
or that, yeah, or they received the call and said, "Speed up, Hulk. He's apparently coming for you." It was
so strange.
It was so weird, yeah. I mean, had he said that and then immediately thrown it up the inside and made a pass, it would have looked legendary, but it just completely backfired on him, bless him. And it's now become a thing of meme. and it will be coming. I'm surprised that wasn't in WTFs actually. Ocon saying, "Call Haas, tell them I'm coming," and then just
so
not
cringe,
doing anything about it.
Last one then for this week. Andrea Hanna says, "What do you think of Yuki refusing to take the blame for the Piastri incident? I was a little shocked with his anger post-race. In the car, okay, but afterwards, this was clearly on him. It was on him."
Yeah, I think I agree with that sort of sentiment as well, that like maybe in the heat of the moment as it's like unfolding and you know, they hopped up on adrenaline and like everyone's going to go, that was his fault, or like that's just kind of the natural reaction I think in a lot of those scenarios. But yeah, to then see it back post race, have some clarity on it, like we genuinely normally see drivers come back to those situations and go,
yeah, they
that was on me. Yeah. Like I was seeing something different in the moment, and I've seen it back, and I turned in too early. I've only got myself to blame, or whatever. And Yuki though, it's just like, nope, it's not my fault.
Pressure is what it is for me.
True, there is that.
So yeah, that's it. Chris, anything to add there, or shall I lead us out?
No, like I said earlier, I wonder if this is the Ricciardo presence starting
spook
to
people, isn't it? The Ricciardo
spook him a little bit.
Right, that's it for this week. If you've got this far, then you must be enjoying it. So you really should click the subscribe button. Either that, or you just do that thing where when you really hate something, but you can't help but listen to it or watch it. Maybe people do that. I don't know. Anyway, we'll take
Either
it.
way,
We'll take that.
We'll take it.
So you can find us in all the usual places on Twitter, on Facebook, or X, which is what Twitter used to be, is now called. Formerly, everywhere you go, it's like formerly Twitter, isn't it? Every article.
Formerly Twitter, yeah.
Can we not just all agree to carry on calling it Twitter?
Anyway.
It's not like a single person is like,
I don't know
Twitter.
I don't know what that is.
Oh,
you mean X?
Oh, do you mean X?
Oh, you mean X, right, yeah.
So you can find us on there, whatever you call it. And we will see you for the next one, where we will be reviewing the Brazilian Grand Prix. Thanks so much for joining us. Goodbye.
Bye.